It's time to talk music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast. So, this week, we want to have a discussion about genre. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Does it help people find music? Or does it put people off the music that they could potentially like?
One of the main arguments you hear from a lot of pop artists is that they don't want to be put into a box when they have a lot of range. But the downside is, how can you find an artist that you've never heard of if there isn't a snazzy little word like grunge or pop or alt that you can click on?
Rock, or there's so many so silly ones as well, ones that don't really mean anything. You're like,
down to splittercore.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, dance music has really got genre naming figured out because they split it up by sort of beat, BPM, and sound design, which is really what genre is all about. And they sort of like micromanage it to a point where if it's slightly faster, it's a different genre.
Also, as you say, sort of to a certain degree, like harmonic content, like you have house and you have deep house, you have tropical house, like
progressive house.
There's a million houses you could go into, but it's one of those things where chances are if you're looking for house and you know what type of house you like, maybe it might be easier to find what you're looking for. Whereas, as we often complain about, when you go into rock, yeah, there's some subgenres there. There's a lot of subgenres there. Are they being utilised? Definitely not.
Where does the line start between rock, hard rock, soft rock? It's like, how do you go about categorising that? A lot of bands people seem to like calling themselves hard rock. But does any band actually call themselves soft rock?
Definitely not. That's something that somebody else calls you. I also think as well with the pop punk sort of revival, it's all being called pop punk, but it isn't, is it? It's not pop punk as pop punk was in the 2000s.
Also, when you look at like a lot of the bands on Wikipedia, a lot of these like pop punk revival bands are just listed as rock. Yeah. They'll just get put on the Rock This playlist on Spotify.
And it is a myriad of genres as well, like you say, like hardcore and post-hardcore and alternative, all sort of...
New metal.
New metal. They all
blend together. Yeah.
So really, I feel like if you're using the big brain marketing strategy of the people who coined the term grunge, what they really need to do for this pop punk revival is come up with a snazzy, be it similar, it can involve pop and punk, but they need to, a bit like with new metal, they need to say, this is a new wave of music, it's a new thing, this is going to make it really easy for everybody to find all these brand new bands that you at the moment, I feel like you're almost stumbling across them. Like, they're not, a lot of them, say if you take Hot Milk, for example, they're only just really getting radio play from what I've heard, or on like Radio 1 and stuff. If you haven't already heard of them, or it would be easier to say, if you have heard of them, it's probably because you've either gone to gigs, or you really scour the internet on YouTube
or
and
you've
stuff
just
like that.
heard them on shuffle on Spotify, one of the many myriad of playlists on Spotify. You'll catch a song, go, right, I'll add that and check out the band on Spotify.
Spotify brings up an interesting thing though, doesn't it? Because what do people do? They pick a genre on Spotify, a playlist, be it a hard rock or they have like the specific ones like alt rock and new rock and all that. But that leans straight back into a genre. Yeah. So it's hard because even if you as an artist want to be genreless, you want to be, this is my whatever era and I'm like a fluid creative. At the end of the day, your songs are going to get put onto targeted playlists.
And are you better off if your songs are specifically made for targeted playlists?
I would have thought so, because it's more like a marketing thing of, it's easier for somebody else to look and go, I think I know what that is. I think I know what fits with that. Whereas when you sort of don't really give an inch in terms of fitting into a little box, somebody might listen to it and go, well, I don't really know what that is, so I'm not going to put it on this playlist.
And even at this point, if you completely sort of like, if you say mashing lots and lots of genres into one song, like a band like Enter Shikari and stuff, you'll just get put in the alt category.
Yeah, very true, yeah.
So it's like, it's sort of like a win-win, lose-lose sort of thing. There's not really an answer to a lot of this sort of stuff.
Alt does seem to be where genre goes to die, doesn't it? It's the sort of go, well, we can't really figure out what this is, so it must be alt rock.
Yeah, and it, you know, even down to like, obviously you have alt pop and dark pop, which sort of
Dark
feed
pop
into
is
like
interesting.
yeah, feed into this sort of the pop side of this, and you know, there's probably 100 genres in electronic and other genre fields that sort of bleed into this, where you just have alternative. You know, it's just alternative, and alternative can be whatever it wants to be. It's alternative, and then you have your alternative, all normal genres as the subtext.
People who enjoy categorizing and or gatekeeping, however you sort of view it, can then figure out what everybody in that is.
Yeah, and I think it's beneficial to look for, like, I've been trying to look for ambient drum and bass, and even on Bandcamp,
It's tough.
Very, very difficult. Now, if you put one more genre classifier, if you want to go deeper than just ambient and you want to try and look for a certain specific type of ambient drum and bass, then you're really going to have a bad time, because you're filtering through all this stuff that isn't what you're looking for. It's like on Bandcamp Friday, I was trying to look for some stuff that was like a little bit more like PS1 revival style drum and bass, and I just could not find what I was looking for. And you know, you can tell, obviously this is where the album covers come in, and they really tell you, no, this is the one you're looking for, because the album covers that I was looking for stood out like, you know, nothing else.
But in all honesty, though, that means that there could have been like a perfect like ambient drum and bass album, mislabeled, misrepresented by the album cover, that might have been better than the ones you actually purchased.
Yeah.
And again, this comes into the age-old thing. We all hate it. I think creative people do hate it, but people talk about marketing is more important than the music. And I don't think it is, but I do think that if you misstep your album cover or your overall brand, you might sort of dissuade people from clicking. It's particularly on Bandcamp, where if you're looking at like a billion artists all at once, unfortunately it is the one that catches your eye that you're going to click on and maybe listen to.
It's like, it's no, a digital music store or a streaming platform is no different to a physical music store. When you walk in to any shop like HMV or any other kind, I mean, most of them shut. I can only really think of HMV at the moment. So you walk into HMV, the first thing you're presented with is a wall of album covers, and it's all about which album cover grabs your attention and what do you like, and does it fit into, say, the type of music you listen to. Now, if you see four guys and they've got drums and guitars on the album cover, you're going to think, well, maybe they're a rock band. They're probably a rock band. Sometimes when you just see a photo of somebody, you've no idea. When you see something more abstract, you've no idea what it is. Now, if you start to get to that classic rock thing of, you see sort of the colour palettes, the art design, it looks a little bit like Asia, it looks a little bit like Yes, then you probably know it's going to be proggy. But this is like a intuition thing, and you've got to know what music, what a lot of bands and stuff have, to then start to associate things. Now, if you don't know like the history of a genre, you're going to look at an album cover and say a shop like HMV, you're going to go, I've no idea what that is. And we've bought albums, no idea what they are, and just gone, oh, we'll just try it on the album cover. And sometimes, like in a music store, obviously, yeah, some of them you can listen and preview the records, but most of the time you're not going to be able to do that.
Like that's gone way out of fashion.
It might be more of an American thing in like American vinyl shops as well, but in the UK we just don't seem to get that, unless you go to like a really like local store, maybe.
Yeah, a specialist
vinyl record store. But like with CDs, you're not going to put a CD in a CD player and listen to it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine like picking up like a U2 CD and then going to the counter and saying, "Can I listen to this?"
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
They'd be like, "Get your phone out, just listen to it on Spotify. Come back tomorrow, maybe."
Yeah, so that's part of this like album cover genre. I think the album cover is as important as the genre a lot of the time, because it sort of, they go hand in hand.
It sort of can tell you. It can be like look, I'm this. Yeah. I'm a classic rock album in disguise, or I'm an alt rock album, or maybe I'm heavy, I'm light, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I do agree that an album cover, it is like, there's a reason why music and art was paired together. I know I've seen discussions say, well, do we still need that? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we need that more than ever.
In the streaming era, you don't really need the album cover, but did anybody enjoy the torrenting LimeWire Napster days where you just had a load of mismatched, wrongly named files with no album covers in iTunes and you just didn't know what you had?
And most of them were trolls
Well,
at a certain point.
That's it as well.
Because how are you supposed to know? You're probably 9.
Yeah.
You're on your mum and dad's computer and you download a Toto song and somebody gives you a Don Henley song. How on earth are you supposed to know the difference?
Yeah, I remember downloading Mustang Sally and it said it was by ZZ Top, and it wasn't. It was the original. Is it? Who does it? Is it Wall?
Oh, no, I don't know.
I can't
I'd
remember.
have to Google that one.
But like I say, obviously, I much prefer looking at a towel, sort of like all the album artwork, and then just going, I'll have that one. That's the benefit with album artwork that a lot of people overlook, and this is why I always have, like, I never like it's a picture of me stood in like a photo studio and my name in like Times New Roman at the side, because it tells you nothing about the album.
If anything, it says piano pop, maybe.
Yeah, well, it just says your
Yeah.
absolute standard sort of major label release, because that's what they tend to do. They tend to go, Face, you stood against a cool wall, here's your name straight underneath your album title, that's your album cover. Whereas having like pieces of art with the band's logo at the top, name in the middle or somewhere, always seem to grab me a lot more.
Or if the artists are placed in an interesting setting for the cover as well, that can be an equally good representative.
Yeah, it can be like a photo shoot of like a full street, lots going on, and the band's like somewhere in the middle, all in different places, and those are a lot more interesting. Tells you a lot more about the band.
Yeah.
Than somebody just stood looking at the camera in like a bland photo studio.
At that point, you're going into like micro marketing of, well, the fact that one eyebrow's raised tells you that this artist is a bit mischievous.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're leaning or they're wearing this tells you they're comfortable and it's going to be relaxing. So I think at a certain point, like, unless you literally shoot them for a living, like you take them pictures and you're directing these artists for a living, it's going to be lost on most people because you are going for a basic emotion to represent in like basically your pose. And I'm not sure that how, you know, like accurate that is to do, because also there's a lot of situations where they'll like say, oh, this is like a edgier, like more, you know, heavy hitting artist. And you'll listen to the songs and you'll go, Ian.
I do think there's like a weird thing going on with album covers where I'm seeing a lot of extremely plain album covers at the minute. You know, like album covers that are almost like, just like, say, the Foo Fighters album is, you almost have to squint when you see it on like Amazon or Spotify to see what it is. Now, there's a slight stripe going down. There's a slight white
like
line, but
if you had it on vinyl, it might be more visible. But on digital screens, like on any digital representation, you cannot see that album cover. It just looks white.
yeah, and I do think that's an interesting way to say, if you're looking at a bunch of pictures and then one of them is just white, well, it might grab your attention.
So to break down the Foo Fighters album cover, what do we think it represents? I would have thought it represents either purity or new beginnings based off the events with Taylor Hawkins and everything.
Yeah.
Basically a fresh start. That's what that album cover gives me.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting way to do it. But I suppose, like, say for a band like Foo Fighters, when they go through a traumatic experience, how do you then? I mean, they couldn't be all like sat on like a brick wall, like laughing and joking, like a lot of the press photos. They couldn't have put that out because it would have sent mixed messages. I feel like maybe once they've sort of got back on their feet, they can start leaning into something a bit more like they normally do. But it's an interesting one to think about because I suppose at this point as well, your album cover / era, even though that it seems like a bit cringy sometimes to say era, but that seems to be a good descriptor for like the album tour singles either side package that you get with an album.
At the moment, when people say era, they tend to think of one album. Even though, like, I would said, like, before maybe the tens, you would think of it as like a trio or a
Maybe
decade. A string of albums in a similar style. But now it seems to just be, right, this is a new album, this is a new era, and that seems to be like the marketing strategy, particularly in pop. But obviously I've seen other genres start to adopt this because it's become so popular.
It sounds good in a press release, doesn't it? Oh, fresh new era. I've dyed my hair blonde.
Yeah, well, we always joke about the fact that a lot of people dye their hair blonde and it's like a new era, and then the music sounds almost
Basically
the same. They might have slightly leaned to a different genre here or there, like, oh, it's disco and I've got blonde hair, so brand new era. That seems to be the major label strategy with a lot of pop acts at the moment.
But would you say it's hard with the eras thing because you can radically pivot genres, but most of the time, even if you take somebody like Taylor Swift has a style that she uses. She has her melodics and she has her songwriting sort of tool set that comes across. It doesn't matter whether you're listening to Reputation or like a first album, like Fearless. It doesn't matter if you're listening to that or Anti-Hero or whatever. At the end of the day, it comes across as Taylor Swift because with her being one of the main songwriters or the main songwriter in her project, she collaborates, but she primarily writes all of her songs. So that always comes across. It doesn't matter whether there's trap hats or acoustic guitars. You get that first.
And we end up sort of in this situation with genre where the genre doesn't really matter. It's more like the flavour, if you will, in your food, because you can go into YouTube and look at heavy metal covers of pop songs, pop covers of heavy metal songs, flip it both around. The songs are still there. The skeleton of the song doesn't really change. It's just about the way it's dressed up. The spices, as you will, that they sprinkle on to turn it into a different genre. A lot of the genres, you can get away with putting a standard song in any different genre because at the end of the day, the chords and the melody only do so much, and you can interpret that in as many different ways as you will, and a lot of genres are purely sound design. So this starts to become like anybody can do any genre that they're comfortable with. Obviously, people like, I think a lot of instrumentalists will like a lot of like instrument players is what I mean by that. They will prefer playing in a certain style. Like a lot of rock guitarists will prefer
if you're doing
to
like
play
a shred wave situation, that's gonna definitely push you into a certain box.
Yeah,
but it's
the singers can sort of do whatever they want because they just need to get, like, if you're a pop singer, you can go, I'll just get a different band.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, if they say have a producer in, they say, well, this one's going to be a pop thing, this one's going to be country, this one's going to be rock, and it's quite easy if you've just got really the skeleton of a song and a vocal to dress that up as whatever you want, because like you say, it is mostly sound design and instrument choices.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes it's just a mix. Sometimes you can have a pop mix and somebody could be like, we want to do a rock mix. It's like, all you do, you lift your guitars up a bit, compress it a bit, put some extra bits of distortion, a bit more like edge on it. Yeah. And boom, it's basically a rock mix.
Or you just get like a drummer to play the programmed drum loop and bam, rock mix. You know, it seems like that simple some of the time.
If it's a live band recording, like with country and stuff, it's very easy to turn a country song into a rock song. Essentially, but just by mixing it, because a lot of the time they do have distorted guitars in the mix and stuff. It's just, it'll be balanced for country music. I mean, Shania Twain's a massive example. I know they did do some re-instrumentation, but they delivered that album
in 3 different genres, in three different
mixes, 3 different styles.
Yeah, in 3 different continents. Is not quite continents. Is it like
regions? Maybe
3 different regions. There we go. Regions of entertainment, because obviously each region has different entertainment sort of standards, different like disc encodings, and basically it was to lean into that instead of just Mutt Lange's idea, I believe. Instead of just putting the album out in different territories, it was, well, what's popular in Europe, what's popular in Asia, and what's popular in America, and it was 3 different albums mixed in a way to lean into each of those regions. And that's why the European version, that don't impress me much, is like a Europop sort of dance mix, which is fantastic. And then I never really realised until I listened to the original, the American version, that it's just a country song.
Yeah. But the song, the song is the same.
The song's
it's the same song.
Yeah.
Very different feeling in places, but ultimately nothing really like the song. If you're singing along to it, there's no difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting when it comes to this as an argument, because obviously you want to fit into some kind of... Well, some people don't want to fit in some kind of box, actually, but a lot of artists will want to be in a particular area. They want to be in a zone of genres, you would imagine.
I would say that some of the most creative in their zones were like 2010s alt rock, because rock was sort of like left a bit. It's sort of, I feel like rock was almost like killed in the 2010s because it didn't seem to be anywhere. But the rock that was there was these alternative rock bands. I always like cite bands like Imagine Dragons and Bastille and
Walk the Moon, Churches, even though they're less rocky, but they seem to have got more rocky over time as well.
Or you could say bands like Glass Animals fit the mold as well.
Yeah.
There is a lot of them, but they sort of had to be very creative because they could present themselves as a rock band, but at the same time they had to incorporate like electronic drums, trap hats. You know, you regularly hear like with Imagine Dragons, like they're basically rapping sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're using completely different like songwriting devices.
Or they'll put a drop in instead of a chorus and things like that. You know, these little things that obviously a drop as we know it today, it just wasn't there. And then it just suddenly happened in arrangements and songs. And then it was like the staple all the way through, like the late 2000s all the way through to the 2010s. It was all about having a drop. And then you saw, no matter what genre you was in, you could add a drop instead of a chorus. And it's a completely different arrangement tool that just wasn't there before that people can use.
That weightlessness feeling before the drop, that's still a staple of music where you pull all the percussion and drums out on the pre-chorus and you go for like a weightless pre-chorus, whereas I feel like that's such an uncommon songwriting device in like, say, before the 2000s. Like, I can't think of many songs at all where the pre-chorus is the sparsest section in the arrangement.
Even like a lot of electronic music in the before the year 2000, a lot of it just has a rolling drum beat and they don't really take that drum beat out or put it back in. It's just like continuous.
Even, I would argue, like Daft Punk saves that sort of stuff for the bridges in the songs. The pre-choruses tend to just be the pre-choruses tend to just roll, but the bridge will be the weightless section.
Yeah, and some of the early Daft Punk songs, it's just a rolling loop for like 5 minutes, and it doesn't. It changes here and there, and it sort of morphs over time, and there's like intensity ramping up and then sort of relieving, but by comparison,
it's like a static arrangement.
Yeah, it's just a block, and it's just start, music, finish on some of those songs on Homework and even Discovery to an extent, but Discovery definitely play about with arrangements a lot more than Homework. Homework is just like 4 to the floor the entire time going. Almost. So yeah, it is interesting when you look at genre to music to marketing, and they're sort of tied together and they can move freely. Some people might say, well, I want to do a visual style that doesn't actually go with the musical style I'm doing. And you see that a lot with, say, synthwave. You'll have a lot of rock bands like Dragon Force using like synthwave,
the visual staples,
yeah, synthwave visuals, but then the album will just sound like Dragon Force.
And then there's bands like Reckless Love that take the entire package and just say, we're going to do this, we're just going to bring the guitars up in the mix, but ultimately they on their newest album have just made a synthwave record, and it's still a fantastic rock album though, because ultimately the rock songs,
they've just dressed them up like synthwave songs with the keyboards, the branding, and then like
sound design,
leaning into it, like calling the song Outrun and knowing, actually having some kind of research in what they're doing, whereas a lot of people just don't do that. They just don't research it, whereas you feel like Reckless Love actually understand what synthwave is on their synthwave album.
Yeah,
which definitely helps.
What was cool as well is the singer Ollie Herman, I want to say.
Yeah.
He had like a synthwave playlist on his Spotify, which it had a very good selection. And as you say, it's actually nice sometimes to see a band pivot into a new sort of genre or new sound that actually know what they're doing. Because sometimes people pivot into a new genre and it's like, oh, do you even listen to this?
I feel like dubstep, there was a lot of people who went, yeah, let's do dubstep, but really didn't. They
didn't know anything about it.
They might not have actually wanted to do it. You have like, and this goes in all forms. You have say like Biffy Clyro, Black Chandeliers. You're sort of leaning in, scratching the surfaces of dubstep with the way you're using the guitar,
incorporating that, but be it different.
Then you have obviously a lot of singers after dubstep became really popular had like dubstep drops, whether they wanted to or not. It might be the label step in, put the foot down, go. Yeah, you're getting into dubstep because it's hot right now. You know, you don't know why on some, particularly like the major labels. It's always hard to figure out who's doing what and why that will happen. Maybe the singer will have said, "I want to do this." Maybe one of the producers will have said, "No, you're doing this." You know, I know it's a collaborative effort, but depending on the label, depending on the dynamic between the team, some people get forced to do stuff. Some people ask to do stuff, don't they? So you have labels like Frontiers, which are almost genre-specific labels. Like on the rock side, you have Frontiers. On the dance side, you'll have labels like UKF,
Hospital Records.
You'll have like New Retro Wave, Synthwave, lots of these labels, because it's very easy for them to basically group up a genre and say, we're going to exclusively do this. Like Future Funk, you have Neon City Records. There's loads that come to mind. So obviously with Frontier Records, the only problem they have is you end up in this scenario where, to somebody who's not really, really into the subtleties of genre, all of the artists can appear the same. That's the only dilemma you have in that situation.
I think there's a lot of factors that lead to that. So, say a record label like Frontiers, they will have an in-house team, like most of these labels, where they will mix, master, produce, definitely the artwork. A lot of it you can see it's in-house. So if the band isn't bringing anything to the table but the songs, then
it goes through like the funnel, the factory funnel.
It goes through
basically.
the chain, yeah. And all of a sudden, if there isn't anything but, you know, like decent AOR songs, well, they're going to sound the same as the next band that has decent AOR songs, because ultimately there's a lot of personality in the way a song can be like mixed and packaged, and the creativity of a mix.
And for me, this is where bands like, say, Cray, Palace, Eclipse, Work of Art stand out on a label like that, because they have that melodic rock feel, but they also bring an element of production to their music that you don't hear across the board on a label like that.
Yeah, and it's, say, like with Work of Art, it's the use of synthesizers, and some of them are not like vintage synthesizers. Some of them is quite modern and quite forward-thinking synth design, as well as having like vocal stacks, Queen-esque vocal stacks and stuff that really start to bring the songs out and elevate the songs to the next level, where them... And also the Work of Art absolutely mix the hell out of their tracks. Like, they're loud, they're punchy, they sound great.
But they also have creative effects instead of just regular effects. Like, there's one thing to put a delay on a singer, there's another thing to take the backing vocals, put a delay swell on them, and just have like a swell of backing vocals coming in to start a song, because that's a lot more powerful to a lot of people than just, say, a delay on the singer. And it's all about ways you could dress up an arrangement and ways to use creative mixing that makes your standard, say, AOR track stand out. And this is the same, like, even like with, say, drum and bass, Dimension, blending trance and drum and bass together.
Yeah.
It gives it, well, and then obviously on the new track, they've got orchestral stabs all over the place as well. And it just makes it different from everything else. It stands out when you listen to it. You immediately go, well, this song has personality. It's not like every other drum and bass song I've heard. It's different. And that's the thing with any genre in like any catalogue of music. It's how do you make your music stand out in comparison to everything else that's there?
There's like, I feel like there's two goals as a musician in a music scene. There's number one is to sound like the scene, because that's how you get into the scene.
Sound like everybody else there.
Yeah, and then once you achieve that, you're like, well, now I need to stand out. And then it's like, how do you stay within the realms of where you have put yourself, and also like bridge yourself to give yourself like something that stands out, something that's like either creatively interesting, or like you were saying, how do you incorporate another genre or style into that genre that you're making without losing the genre you've, like, if you're a drum and bass DJ, how do you incorporate like trance or happy hardcore or whatever it is without losing drum and bass status as an artist?
Yeah.
Or is that something that you even care about? That's the other debate in the first place.
Yeah, I think we also, in this sort of debate, a lot of artists are trying to shake the shackles of genre and say, well, I can do whatever I want. You know, artists like Rina Sawayama come to mind. She doesn't care what the genre is. She's doing it, and it's going to be like a different genre every song on the album, and that's great from one person's perspective. But if you maybe like a certain thing, if you like one of her songs, maybe you only get two of them on the album.
If you like her doing a specific style.
So it's like yeah, it's a weird thing. Like we talk about, say, quality and quantity. It's like, well, with genre, that dictates whether you as a fan thinks that is good, because you could like vocal pop and you could not be too jazzed about hearing heavy rock, or you could like dance, and then as soon as it's not dancey, you're like, well, I came here for beats. I didn't come here for like emotional piano music. And you know, there's this like dilemma you have. Obviously you need range as an artist, and if you do a gig and every song sounds the same, is it a detractor? I would say it is.
Definitely can be. Definitely can be an issue.
In a live environment, you don't want every song to sound the same because you need different moments during a concert.
Yeah. But I think with, like, say people like Rina Sawayama, it's an interesting thing because there's another, again, there's two arguments to it. If they can get, say they've got two electronic, two rock, two pop, two weird or experimental, and two
jazz one.
Yeah, two like piano, acoustic-y jazz, whatever you want to say, as an example. If they can land songs off that album on a myriad of different playlists and actually hit a myriad of audiences that all go, well, I like this Rina Sawayama person, then I would argue they do a good job, because then if they can convert them passive listeners into active fans, then they're really, really getting the most bang for the buck.
They're getting a lot more exposure than they could be.
Yeah, but if all of them people then go to check the album out, which I'm sure not many people actually do these days, but I'd like to do that, and they go, oh, well, I thought it was all going to be like this song I heard, and it's not, does that push them away from being an active fan, and does that keep them in their passive zone? Because I think that's a very tough thing to crack as an artist. Like, how do you go from people saying that's a cool song to people going, no, I'm ride or die this artist, it doesn't matter what they put out, because this is what Taylor Swift fans are like. They're like, it doesn't matter what she puts out, she could put out a dubstep album or anything, or she could pivot. I mean, can you imagine Taylor Swift doing like heavy, like screamer rock? Can you imagine her doing that?
Yeah, like hardcore punk or whatever.
But her fans would stay. If she went and just I'm doing a straight up, I'm talking 1977 On the Edge punk album.
Yeah.
Her fans would stay with her.
Yeah. And that's almost what Miley Cyrus did with Plastic Hearts. It was leaning into that, particularly for the branding. I think the songs didn't quite have that.
Yeah, the songs weren't very heavy.
But obviously the branding and the entire visual package was basically that CBGB's punk thing.
Yeah.
That's what she went for.
And that's the thing, like they've got, I would say, active fans. I'm using this like I'm talking about speakers, but I think it's a good analogy because there is two types of listener. There's people who listen and go, I don't mind that. Yeah, it's in my Spotify playlist. They're all right. And people are like, I just want more. Give me the demos. Give me the unreleased songs.
I'm pre-ordering everything.
Yeah, I'm pre-ordering everything. I haven't heard anything, but I'm going to buy it and support the artist regardless. So, and I think that is the audience everybody wants, because that's the audience that is not only more grateful and more probably satisfying to release music to, because they just appreciate what they get, but it's also the most creatively freeing audience, because you can go, well, they don't seem to care what I'm doing as long as it's, it reaches a certain quality.
Yeah.
Like it hits the bar of what you would expect from that artist, but they could really pivot in any direction and people are probably going to be happy with it.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see how different artists evolve in different markets. And that's basically been our genre / marketing / artwork discussion that's sort of gone all around the place.
It's hard staying in one box.
Well, it is, yeah, and that ties into the genre theme of this episode, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully you've had a nice time listening and you've thought what we've said is interesting. Think about, how do you want to make music if you do make music? And if you're a consumer, what do you prefer? Do you prefer people to stay in the lane? Do you prefer people to go out their comfort zone?
Are you an active fan or a passive listener? That's the thing to think about. And if you are both, who are you more engaged with? There's the question. Right, so that's been the Hurton Audio Podcast. I've been Peter.
I've been Mark. See you next week.